God damn.
What's up, sexy YouTubers? CoolHandSnook here, and I'll just be commentating over this Halo 4 gameplay. It's just a number of different clips kind of meshed together. It's nothing special or anything, but I figured, why not? So today I'm going to be doing a highly requested commentary. A lot of people have been asking me to do a commentary on why my life sucked up until the past 2 to 3 years of my life, and that's a really deep subject. It's hard for me to talk extensively about that within like 7 minutes time, which is usually about how long my commentaries are. So what I'm going to do is I'm really going to talk about the worst moment in my life. That way you guys can kind of get an idea of why my life kind of was crappy. So I'm sorry that this is kind of a depressing commentary, but don't worry, because tomorrow I have something special planned that should be really fun. So if you guys don't know, I wasn't raised by my mom and dad like, some people have. I'm not trying to say that my life was so terrible, it wasn't, worse than everybody else's or anything like that. But for the most part, it was just my mom and my grandfather raising me. And that's because my dad was never around. He ran out on us like when I was 6 months old or something like that. I only met my dad twice. I met my dad once when I was 11, and I found out that I had a bunch of little brothers and sisters and stuff like that all around the U.S. because he gets around. But I met him once because he was in court, and then I met him again as an adult at 20 years old, and he was asking me if I could give him money and stuff like that. So, I mean, me and him aren't close, needless to say, you know what I mean? There would be times, though, growing up where my mom and my grandfather would clash, because my grandfather was a really supportive person towards me. And my mom was really jealous of that because, according to her, when she was growing up, my grandfather was not supportive. He was really mean and all this kind of stuff, and he quote-unquote hated them, which isn't true, but she says this stuff. And he was really committed to me. He wanted to make sure that I had everything that I ever needed. Whenever I said stuff like, even if I said I want to be an astronaut, he would take what I said seriously, and he would buy me science books and tell me stuff like, you can be an astronaut, you just have to study, you have to be, smart, and you have to do this, you have to do that, He was super supportive of me no matter what I said I wanted to do. He had full confidence that I could do it. But my mom, on the other hand, was always like, you ain't never going to do that, you can't do that, you won't be able to do that, you won't be able to find a job doing that. See, I lived with my mom. She would drop me off at my grandfather's house to get babysat and stuff like that, or to just, when she was at work or whatever, she would leave me there. My mother's house and my grandfather's house were literally like 20 minutes apart. But there would be months sometimes when I didn't see my grandfather because my mom and my grandfather would clash, and they would, get in arguments and stuff, because it was always about me, though. It was like, he would be mad because she took me out of sports, and she would say stuff like, oh, he doesn't need to be in sports or whatever. And I don't know, they would fight all the time. It got really bad around the time when I was 15 and 16, because I was starting to get in trouble a lot in school and everything, and my grandfather blamed her, and she would, yell at him and everything, and they would fight all the time. I hadn't seen my grandfather for about a month, and I had been bothering my mom the whole month, like, hey, take me to go see Grandpa. I want to see Grandpa. I haven't seen him. I mean, I get to talk to him on the phone, but that's not the same, It's not like he lives far away. And so she's like, she finally caves, and she brings me over there, and I go into the house, and my aunt, who was his caretaker at the time, was just sitting on the floor crying. She's just like sitting like cross-legged crying on the floor. And I'm like, what's going on, And they say, well, she tells me, your grandfather, I don't know what's wrong with him, but he was talking like all this nonsense. And so I called the ambulance because he started not being able to breathe very well. So I called the ambulance. They came, they picked him up, and he's at the hospital right now. I said, well, what the hell are you doing here? Like, why don't you go over there? So she's like, I just don't know what to do. So I guess she was hysterical at the moment. We all get in the car, we head over to the hospital, and he's in the emergency room. So I go over to the room where he's at. There's like a doctor and a few nurses or whatever. They're all just kind of standing around. And I'm like, what's going on? Why aren't you guys, like, doing anything? Because I see my grandfather laying there. I walk over to my grandfather. I put my hand on his hand, and he doesn't, like, grab back or anything. His hand isn't really cold or anything. It's still kind of warm. But he's not moving, except for he's kind of twitching, He's, like, twitching, and he's like, covered in his own vomit because of, I guess they put, like, some kind of tube down his throat. He's got, like, all this vomit on him and stuff. And his eyes were kind of twitching. I'm thinking, he's dying. Why aren't you doing anything? Well, according to them, they tell me he's dead. They tell me that he died or whatever. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's moving. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's still moving. They tell me, well, you know, his nerves are dying still. So I start kind of freaking out. Like, I get pissed and I'm crying and I don't know what to do, you know, because I'm standing there, you know, and I'm touching my grandfather's face and he's not responding. And it was awful, right? And I still have nightmares about it. And the thing that is the worst about it is it's not the nightmares where I'm walking in and I see him dead again. Like that's something I can handle because I came to grips with the fact that he died a long time ago. The worst nightmares are when I come into the house and he's walking around and he's talking and everything, and I'm like happy to see him and we're talking and everything, and then I wake up, you know, and I can't be with him. I mean, that's probably the worst thing ever. I mean, that's like the worst thing that's ever happened to me, you know. And then after that, after he dies and everything, at his funeral, my family didn't really know what to do as far as his funeral went. We didn't have a lot of money, and they didn't really know how to handle the funeral, how to organize it and everything, so they gave it off to my uncle's ex-wife because I don't know why they even did that, because my grandfather hated this woman. And so she organized this really terrible funeral. It was awful. She invited all these stupid people over, and none of them really knew my grandfather, and they were saying stupid stuff that didn't even make sense about him. And at one point she goes up and she was commenting, because everybody is supposed to say a few words about my grandfather after he dies, right? So she goes up to the podium and she starts talking and saying, you know, he gave up on life, he was weak and he was sick and he just couldn't live with himself anymore, so he just let go and all this kind of stuff. And I get furious. So I go up to the podium right after her. Yeah, I don't know if it was like my turn or whatever because I wasn't put on the program, you know. But so I go up there and I start telling her off like from the podium. I'm like, you know, anybody that would say that my grandfather gave up on life is an idiot and didn't even know him. I mean, you don't even know my grandfather. The only times that you ever saw my grandfather was when you came over to borrow money. So my grandfather never even liked you. I don't even know why you're in charge of this thing. And so, you know, people start coming up to take me down from the podium. And I'm not screaming, but I'm just speaking the truth, you know. And I was just pissed off. It was like such a terrible time in my life. I mean, that when I was like 16, it was awful. I didn't even get to say goodbye or anything like that. I don't know if that would have made things better, but it was awful. So, I mean, you guys wanted to hear this story for whatever reason. I'm glad that I could get it out of the way. I've kind of been wanting to just get it over with, because it's really hard for me to talk about. But, you know, hopefully you enjoy it. I mean, you don't have to leave a like if you don't want to. It's just a pretty depressing story, so I understand if you don't. All right. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.